Hi, and welcome to Crash Course Cryptozoology. Even though I haven't been keen on the old podcast, and I'm actually revamping the idea of the Crash Course Cryptozoology podcast into a newer one, this video is something that might be in the vein of a podcast, or at least in a similar category. At the same time, it is very different in the sense that the information in this video is very, very important and very new to a particular cryptozoology case in the United States. If you have spent a significant amount of time at all in cryptozoology, it's likely that you've heard of the case of Mothman. With the somewhat silly title, of course, the Mothman case is actually quite a perplexing one. People across time and across the country, but particularly in 1967 in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, have reported strange flying creatures or animals which have humanoid appearances but also seem to have strange features like low-set heads, large reflective or glowing eyes, and rather leathery wings. Of course, many descriptions will differ and still be lumped into the similar category, and it's important to note that because you do have reports of more vastly humanoid appearances, something akin to the Mothman statue, versus things like giant owls, which all sort of get lumped into this Mothman category of unknown winged being. Even though Mothman, as a case, achieved fame in the 60s, it is still relevant to cryptozoology today through the case of what has been widely known as the Chicago Mothman, or the Lake Michigan Mothman, or perhaps more to the point with this video, the O'Hare Mothman. This phenomenon, mirroring a lot of the reports from Point Pleasant in the 60s, is occurring in Chicago, around Lake Michigan, and at the O'Hare National Airport in Illinois. Both visitors and workers at O'Hare especially have reported very strange sightings and encounters with these unidentifiable winged animals. Researchers such as Tobias Wayland, Emily Wayland, and the person we're speaking with today have provided a lot of insight into what it is that people describe this phenomenon as once they become involved with it, and in that way are hopefully getting us closer to answers about this oddly widespread and oddly consistent cryptozoology case. With that sort of brief introduction in there, I would like to welcome Austin Edwards.
That in this case is particularly, because I don't want to make it something it's not, because there have been reports outside of O'Hare and stuff like that, but I just had the privilege to only focus on the whole O'Hare side. But no, because I found it fascinating with what I saw and what I read, because at first I thought it was, I hate to say it about Chicago, but, there's a lot of people that have problems and, just want attention. But then when the Chicago Tribune did a report on it, and then I even found, I know you usually stray away from this topic, but MUFON actually published 3 reports on it. That's when I got interested, and I was lucky that my friend, he started hearing things, and that's when I actually took it seriously. And I'm like, wow, this is something so close. I would love to investigate this. But it wasn't just O'Hare. It's also remotely around, and even in the little towns outside of Chicago where there have been sightings reported. And I loved that. I would say about last year, there was also another documentary, another team that was, interested. I believe you may be familiar, Small Town Monsters. And so when I got to talk to them, it was great. And then when I went to O'Hare myself for the 3 days, it was just mind-blowing, because they treated it so nonchalantly.
Mm.
They acted like it was normal. Well, for what I did is I went there. Of course, I was only able to speak to the people that my friend knew, because buying a ticket and just walking around an airport, that's not really a good thing if you're not taking a flight. But what I got, it was the one I remember. I talked to a security guard, and she was, just the person who passed people down. But she went to her car, and there was a light post, and she said she looked at the light before she got into her car, and then she saw a supposed figure, and the wings came out, but how she described it was it almost looked like leather. And then it came down, and when it came down, that's when she got in her car and, excuse my French, she got the hell out of there. And then when I got to see, because I did eventually purchase a ticket to get into the back, legal reasons, but I saw the claw marks on the railing, and it's a shuttle that transfers you to different parts, but on the railing there were 4 on each side, and they were deeper. Like it almost looked like somebody took a saw and sawed it into the metal almost. It was really mind-blowing. I got to talk to the shuttle operator, and he doesn't want his name released, but he said that at first when they saw it, it was, at first, they thought it was a bird or something. But then when somebody on the shuttle said, "Hey, what is that?" he really paid attention to it, and then, like, he said it watched them, but then he saw it almost leap. That's how he described it. And when he said it leaped, he thought he was crazy. He thought he was just having a glitch in the mind. But then upon further investigation, the claw marks were actually there. And what struck me as crazy is because I actually had the chance to see the railing, and they were deep. It wasn't just like a little scratch or something you could do with a key. It was actually indebted into the metal.
Do you know how long the scratch marks each were?
I would say, looking at them, maybe 3 inches, okay. Because it was like rounded the way they did it. Like, it was like you could tell something just jerked almost. That's what it looks like. And it just went like through, like completely through. It's not round. They're not rounded. There's no circles. It was like completely through it. Like something, like I could say a saw or something actually went down. And it blew my mind, because at first I'm thinking, okay, this may be a key mark. Somebody can scratch it. There's easily a way you could fake that. But when I saw the marks, that was different. That's for sure. It was definitely different.
Now, because there were, how many marks were there altogether?
8.
8.
But
okay.
It was it was 4 and 4.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to get at. So it looked as though it was something that 2, let's say, identical parts of the body or identical objects had caused.
Yeah, let's say if there was a human standing on the rail and he had really sharp toenails or fingernails, and he would jump, instead of 5, there was 4.
Mm-hmm.
And on each side. It was on the right and on the left.
Were all of the marks, or I should say, in the groups of 4 that they were in, were all of the marks kind of spaced out, or did you notice that they were very close together?
Well, some of them, on the right side it looked more closer, but on the left it was kind of spread, in a different way. The weight distribution, but just the way it looked, it was very compelling. And it, I believe, I would like to believe they are still there, but it was just so different. And the way it looked, that's what, because at first I'm looking like if there's straight lines, that can easily be, you know, a fake. But it wasn't. They were kind of spread out in a way, but it was only on the left side. You know how you're right armed or left armed, maybe the left leg was the more dominant one, and it was really compelling. Well, it's kind of weird because, as I say, it's not just hair.
Mm.
There is also other things, and there's also actually there was a great photo of a supposed footprint, and there was also other video evidence that was presented. And one that was the most popular, I truly, in my opinion, don't believe, because it almost looks like somebody, you know, in a fly suit that could replicate that. But what was weird is everyone would say it looked leather, and then I had one person that said he thought it was like a Bigfoot but with wings. And it doesn't match up, because some of them will say it's feathers, some of them will say it looks leathery, and then some would say it's hairy. So I don't know if it's just, you know, maybe their point of vision or the trick of the light, but it was different. But the most I get was the feather, and then she had a feather. She found one, and when I seen it, I was thinking of like a crane or something, because we have those in the Chicago area. But when I looked at it, it was very different. And I hate to say it, but she wanted a price to have the picture and everything taken, and I couldn't do it because she thought it was something of value, which it is probably, you know, that could be a great, you know, discovery. But it was so sad that I couldn't take that picture because she found that and she worked there, and I was just like, wow, why wouldn't you want to release this to the public? But, you know, you got to pay to keep the lights on.
Can you describe what the feather looked like in terms of any discernible patterns or the coloration of it?
The best thing I can kind of compare it to is like if you've seen a husky that was white and black, because the weirdest thing was it was like gray, white, and then it went to black, and then it had, well, I don't know if this is the correct term, the bone in the middle of it, but how it did is it curved. It was a strange curve, like almost like a 30 to 40 degree angle to the left. And when I got to hold it, it wasn't like something you could write down on Harry Potter or something. It felt more like a bone. And it was truly incredible. And I pleaded with her to let me do it, but you gotta, you know. And what I found interesting too, though, is considering, was it 1966 on the Point Pleasant reports, they would always say red eyes. And in Chicago, I got reports of yellow eyes. And that was, I believe, Small Town Monsters, of course, respectfully, they reported that too, but they kept saying it was yellow eyes. Like, I remember there was a lady, like, because it wasn't just in O'Hare, there's also been other sightings around and outside of it, and it was this one lady, I remember she told me she was taking out her trash or something, and yellow eyes. And that really blew my mind because I was familiar with the Mothman, and they always reported red eyes. But she kept saying, no, it was yellow. They were yellow eyes. And I was really intrigued by that.
How many reports of yellow eyes did you end up hearing?
Me personally, I had 4.
4, okay.
4, only 4. And 2 of them were from outside residents because I was lurking around, and a few of them decided to talk to me. But 2 of them were actually O'Hare employees.
Okay.
And they act like it's so nonchalant, but a lot of them are afraid to go public. I think it's more in fear of losing their job or credibility.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a shame, because this could be a bombshell or something very intriguing, but they're in fear of losing, the way they pay the bills.
Now, you've mentioned, very importantly, that even though O'Hare is kind of like one of the popular areas people talk about for this phenomenon right now, you've also got the reports out near Lake Michigan and Chicago, obviously, and some smaller
Yeah.
communities. What are some of, without naming any people's names, if they don't want that named, obviously, what are some of the places that you've been to that had sightings that are sort of lesser known?
Well, I don't want to bring up my hometown, but
Okay.
I actually had one report in Michigan City out on the Dunes National Park, and
Hmm.
there was a fellow who was outside, and he was looking at the moon, and he seen what he thought was a big bird. But the thing that got me was he was very adamant on there were legs and feet.
Hmm.
He kept saying that there were legs and feet, and I thought that was great. And then outside of Chicago, there was a few of those smaller towns, or like Brankshore or other stuff like that. That was, they would report it, and it was just interesting because a lot of the people would consider them flying humanoids.
Hmm.
And that's why they report it to, like, I know you stay away from this, but the UFO community,
Right, MUFON,
because
like
they
you
were
mentioned.
they were more concerned about that instead of just like a winged cryptid creature, whatever you want to call it. But they were more concerned about it. But like, it was so funny because they would be adamant on distinguishing, like, it had arms, there were legs, there were feet.
Hmm.
And that's what was so compelling, is how would you distinguish that from a bird? And that's what really got me interested. And then when the Chicago Tribune did their report, they, I believe I'm quoting, a flying humanoid or something, like they would say that. And then the few the footprint was interesting, because the photo of the footprint, and I would love to send that to you,
That would be great.
is very interesting because it was in the snow, and it's very distinct. Like, I know how something can melt or look a certain way, but this one was very distinct. And then a couple of the video evidence I got, and I would also recommend anybody watch Small Town Monsters. Their video evidence was very interesting as well, and I don't believe them to be someone that would fake something just for views.
Hmm.
But it was very, very interesting. My thing is, I want to compare it to the Point Pleasant sightings and what happened, but there have been many differences also in them sightings. I wanted to compare it because I was always fascinated with the Mothman, as I'm sure as many people who are interested in this field as we are would want to do, but there were also differences. It was very weird because I came into it thinking, hey, maybe I'll be able to, see or figure out what the Mothman was in Point Pleasant, Virginia. But in Chicago, there were some similarities, but also differences. And that's what is compelling me to think it may be something different.
Hmm.
I wanted to continue it, and I still do, but not as much as I did on them 3 days. It still compels me because to this day there are still reports. And I would love to say there are reports in the other area, because it's not just in O'Hare, it's around. But the fact that it's still happening at O'Hare is interesting.
Hmm. Absolutely.
And I plan on going back in about 2 weeks because he invited me, and I would be happy to see my old friend, but also get closer to this. It's just very interesting because I wanted it to be the same Mothman, supposedly, but there are many similarities and differences. Well, I feel that I really want to be able to talk to and get that feather analyzed. That's what I really want more than anything. And the claw marks, when I go out there the next time, I'm sure they're still there. I would love to believe to. I would like to get a photo and send it to you to have you do your. I know the way you look at things may be different than the way I look at things. So I would love your, opinion on what they actually are or look like.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's what my biggest goal is, because it's been around for a while, but now it's actually, like, of course it's been on Twitter, of course it's been on Facebook, but this is something that needs to be talked about because we actually have the chance to investigate. And I think it's worth investigating.
The phenomenon and reports that Austin was able to get information on are really tantalizing, especially the case of the claw marks, the talon marks, left in the metal railing at the airport. That's a difficult one to parse out for what could have naturally done that, something at least that we're aware of that is natural. It calls a lot of really difficult questions to the table and definitely warrants further investigation. And as I've said, hopefully pushes us towards a better understanding, or perhaps at the very least inspires us to attempt to scrutinize and investigate further this phenomenon. That being said, until next time.